the definition of intuition I use is just unlearned knowledge. You know something that you've got no right to be knowing, but nevertheless, you know it.
The podcast's all about men developing their intuition. Is there a difference between intuition and what you guys do in remote viewing? Welcome to the podcast that guides men to demystify and develop their intuition. I'm your host, Doug Bites. Let's dig into the science and expand your horizons. Today's guest, David Harker, is a remote viewer, trainer, mentor, mystic, magician, host of the Psychic Guys podcast, and moderator of the largest online community of remote viewers. He's particularly interested in the overlap between remote viewing and esoteric spiritual traditions. He has a background in archaeology, software engineering, and life sciences, and lives in North Yorkshire in the UK. David, welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Doug. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and the more I've been researching you, the more I realise how honoured I am to have you on. And so I'm curious, just straight up, we'll go for something fairly basic. For some of the audience, are probably not that familiar with remote viewing. Can you give us the 2 minute basic thing? What's it about for those who just have heard of it, not sure, or haven't heard of it at all?
Sure. So, remote viewing comes out of declassified US military psychic spying program. And that was declassified in the 90s, possibly as part of a bit of a psyop to discredit it or bury it because the truth was starting to leak out. So, as with everything said by the CIA, there's an element of mystery still remaining there. But a great deal of stuff was declassified, and some of the guys who were working in one of the remote viewing programs started teaching civilians, and eventually instruction manuals got out, and people started coming up with their own methods and experimenting and trying different stuff. So fundamentally, remote viewing is just the same as other forms of psychic functioning, but it is within a specific protocol which was designed to prove that it worked in lab conditions. Because you've got to remember these guys were working for a military research project, right? So they weren't allowed to say psychic. Psychic was a dirty word. Nobody was doing magic. There was no intuition. What they were doing was science. And they came up with a whole bunch of jargon, technical terms. And can you imagine going into a room full of generals every single year to renew your funding and you go, yeah, well, the psychic witches have been traveling the astral planes and we can tell you what the Soviet is. So they couldn't do that. So they made this very scientific kind of box to cram psychic functioning into so that they could get paid to do it. And they did that for 20 years successfully without getting shut down because what they were producing was so good. Where we are now, many years later, there's a whole civilian field of remote viewing, people doing all sorts of different methods, some people following the original military stuff, and some people doing just entirely kind of freestyle, doing their own thing. What separates all these people who are remote viewers from other psychics, as I said, is the protocol, which has nothing to do with what you're doing. It's nothing to do with the means of psychic functioning. All it says is the following 4 points. You have a specific target, which you are supposed to describe. And, that might be a Russian submarine base or what's the best product to put on the front of our catalog for next year, right? It could be any unknown thing. It doesn't have to be a physical thing. Could be a person, could be in the future, could be in the past, anything. But you're not allowed to know anything about it. You work blind to the target, right? So you'll be given a random target ID number, which is just like a phone number. It doesn't contain information. It's just, here's target number one. Go and do it. You get nothing other than a blank sheet of paper and your intuition to go from. So then you record your perceptions. You write them down. You do sketches. You maybe do an audio recording. Occasionally, people use clay modeling or get the Play-Doh out. You could do computer artwork if you really wanted to. Whatever, as long as you make a record, which is going right. So you can read tarot cards. You can do whatever you like, as long as you can write me an executive summary while you remain blind to the target. And then the final part in the protocol is you get feedback. Somebody tells you what it was, and that allows you to refine your ability over time.
Wow.
So when we're training, we do basic stuff. So the first targets I start off with is like the ocean, the desert, a big building with nothing going on, really simple, basic things. And once you can get the colors right and tell the difference between the ocean and the desert, and then you can start adding complexity and build up from there.
All right. So I get it with the CIA and, the Russians, whoever, all wanting there's a military target. So they're going to give you latitude, longitude, or something like that, or whatever they give you. But you also, and I totally get that. And you somehow or other, intuitively tap in and you start to see what's there. But one of the things you mentioned there was what's the best product? What's the best design for our logo for the second half of next year? How should we be marketing to? So are you seeing then a new logo for that company or so is that's what you're starting to envision?
Yeah, and it raises some really weird questions about free will and creativity, right? You could remote view what is going to be the best-selling new invention of the next 10 years, for example, right? And you can get
Wow.
that idea and give it to your R&D department, they make it, and then it becomes the best-selling, right? So where did the idea come from? You got it out of the future, took it to the present time,
Wow.
created it. Whose idea was it? And I think eventually, when you bottom that out, if you don't go crazy, it speaks to the idea that I don't know if you've heard this phrase: "People don't have ideas; ideas have people." And there's a few cases of that.
Yeah. Now, not a couple of years ago, 15 years ago, a friend of mine, I used to be a professional firefighter, and actually, it's going back further than that now. We had, because I left 20 years ago. Da, da, da. Anyway, over 20 years ago, not long after I left, we had two firefighters perish in a fire. And so internally within the state fire service, there was a big investigation and there was, where were we lacking? Like what caused it to occur? So a good friend of mine who was a very good fire officer, he came up with this idea to create this control mechanism, like a physical thing that was also involved, like a big Pelican case. You would open it up and there was computerized equipment in there. And it was an accountability thing to account for the firefighters who were inside a building. And so he was constantly playing with electronics. And even 20 years ago, electronics were like improving and changing every few months. And so he was constantly pulling this chip out, putting that in, da 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 da. And eventually, after a year or two or three, I think he sort of got just sick of it because it was so, like changing all the time and evolving. But he did get a product together for the fire service and they started using it. But he was then trying to then take it to another level privately, like making like an RFID wristband for people on a cruise boat. So if someone fell overboard, beep, beep, like because there'd be sensors all around the ship. Um, then up on the Great Barrier Reef, we lost a couple of scuba divers. Snorkelers, from America, the Lonigans. They got left out on the reef, and there was 50 people on the boat. They sort of grabbed them all. They thought they got everyone on the boat, drove off, and left these couple out there. Same thing if they had these little RFID tags. And but after him playing around with that for a year or two or three, someone else in another country came up with the same idea. And I'd said that to him. I said, mate, you're gonna have to get this thing to market soon because the best I know is the universe won't wait. It's You don't own it. It's someone else's mind is going to pick up this thing either from you or from the universe or from somewhere, and they're going to start to develop it too. And that's you were just what you were saying there just sort of brought that to me as well. So does that sort of thing make sense?
Yeah, there's countless cases throughout history of people independently inventing the same new technology or making the same discovery or even starting to write the exact same story at the same time. And I think you're right. If you don't run with it, somebody else will do it. The idea is going to push its way into reality, and you're just the conduit for that.
Yeah, and you can block that conduit up or you can let it flow. But yeah, the
Yeah.
thing through.
And it's what are your skills? If you like the product your colleague was working on, if you know about electronics and stuff, you can go and make something like that. Or if you're a certain kind of artist or a photographer or a musician or a writer or whatever, you can, those are the kind of ideas that you're going to be filtering for, right? Those are
Mm,
the ones that you're a good conduit for because you still need the skills, right?
mm.
Like if I remote view a logo for somebody, for example, which I've never done actually because I suck at drawing. I'm not, I'm not the best artist, right? So I perhaps wouldn't be the best person to ask. And I'm going to do a crude pencil sketch and write some stuff about it and say, oh, the colors are like this, and here are the themes, and it's about this shape, and when it looks cool on the box like this, I'm not going to give you like a finished product, right? You're still going to have to go and get a graphic designer and work through the process.
Guys, if you're on a path of developing your intuition, and I know you are, that's why you're listening here, then the Neurovisor is a tool worth checking out. It uses light and sound to guide your brain into deeper states of awareness, helping you quiet the noise, tap into your inner knowing, and strengthen your intuitive muscle. And who doesn't want that? There's no pills, no fluff, just 11 minutes a day to reset your mind and reconnect with your instincts. I've bought myself one last Christmas and I've added it to my daily practice, and the shifts are real. This is not a paid ad, but if you use the link in the show notes for more information, I do receive a small percentage of the purchase price. I highly recommend you check it out. So here's one for you. I don't watch the news much at all, but I've become aware in the last few months that apparently with scientific equipment, people have discovered structures underneath the pyramids in Egypt. Have you heard, you're familiar with that or not?
I know that that's come back into the news recently.
Hmm.
A little while ago, there was some new radar technology or something, and they
Yeah,
were proposing that there was these big columns and like huge mega structures beneath the pyramids at
that
Giza.
that's it.
And I don't understand why they provided no evidence that this technology worked by applying it to somewhere, where we could compare what the sensing was producing with some ground truth. This is a thing about remote viewing, right? We train with real world targets with feedback, so we can tell whether we were right or not. And what was produced in that paper was kind of a big fuzzy image that looked like it could have been an interference pattern or an artifact, or I mean, maybe there's a big giant underground structure. Who knows, right? Stranger things have happened, but I felt it was really suspect that we had this completely unproven sensing technology, alleged sensing technology, making these very bold claims. And you saw all of the clickbait content producers
Mm.
doing the big open mouth face on the YouTube thumbnail, wow, and not really being critical about it. So, I mean, it remains to be seen. And Egyptology as well is tricky, both because the authorities in Egypt really want to keep a tight control over the narrative. And if you step outside, even as an academic, if you step outside their approved narrative, they will ban you from entering the country. Right?
Mm.
You can come and play, but only if you tell their story. So
Yeah.
it's a tricky area.
So, and I guess what I was sort of going to get at there is like, did you think, like, did someone remote view and see that stuff and then told someone who's got equipment and then the person came in with the equipment? That was what I was just curious what potentially may have happened if it was real. But I haven't followed the story much at all.
In that instance, I don't think remote viewing has anything to do with it, as far as I know. People have remote viewed the pyramids. Obviously,
Mm.
they're a tempting, interesting target. I think people found like voids within the Great Pyramid, and uh, you do get an issue with targets like that, where they are really old things that are emotionally, spiritually important to a lot of
Mm.
people, and where people tell a lot of stories and they project their stories onto the object, right? Because remote viewing doesn't seem to be describing actual physical reality, right? The world we live in with desks and chairs and apparently solid matter isn't the thing that we're describing with remote viewing, but this physical world seems to be emerging from another layer of the universe, and that's the one that we're in. This is the one which our consciousness can traverse to go and find inspiration and great ideas and to have a sudden feeling that I really shouldn't get on that plane, and I don't know why, but I'm not getting on today. I'm going to miss it, and then it crashes, right? Wherever that comes from is kind of a layer of reality just divorced from the physical matter, right? And you can put stuff into that, right? You put stories and myths and legends and conspiracy theories and fears and religions, and there is all sorts of wacky stuff out there. So we have to be really careful when we're remote viewing esoteric stuff like the pyramids and did the aliens make the pyramids? Do you want to know? Do you want to know? No, they did not. Let's move on. So when when you remote view wacky stuff like that, you can get validation of wild ideas and conspiracy theories, and then people take it to be confirmation that these are true, and you just end up with like one wild idea with another wild idea on top. So I try and stay away from that stuff
Yeah.
and stick to more mundane matters.
So just to clarify something you said a couple of minutes ago there, what your remote, did you say you can or can't remote view what we perceive as physically real? Or are you remote viewing a realm slightly outside of that hard physical realm?
Yeah, so I think the physical realm is not base reality, right? Whenever creation came into existence, whatever that was, physical matter was not the first thing to appear. Physical matter is a an epiphenomenon of something that we can't directly perceive most of the time, right? It emerges out of perhaps a field of consciousness, right? It emerges out of something much stranger and less material. So you can think of it as like a video game is a good analogy where you've got the bits and bytes on the computer and you've got all of this information and software and textures and rendering going on. And then you've got the screen where you can see the final moving image that looks really, photorealistic and
And
brilliant.
we think
But
what's on the screen is the real bit, but you're saying
yeah,
it's all of the bits that make it up that interpret,
yeah.
it's the
So
interpretation of it.
in that analogy, with our physical eyes, we're looking at the screen and we're seeing the physical world, right? And we can touch it and walk around on it and eat it and stuff. But when we use remote viewing or our psychic awareness, we're not looking at the image on the screen. We're looking in the computer at all the bits and bytes and code and information, right? So, um, yeah, if people have very strongly held ideas about what they want to find, with remote viewing, they can just go find it. You can make yourself a psychic validation machine instead of a psychic truth finding machine if you're not extremely careful.
Right. So when someone was remote viewing the pyramids, for example, they would definitely need to be doing that blind and not sort of go, "Oh, I'm going to remote view the pyramid
Oh,
of Giza
if you're
today,"
not
because it
blind, you're
just
not
wouldn't
remote viewing.
work. Sorry.
If you're not blind, you're not remote viewing,
Okay. Right. Right. Very, very good
right?
point. All right.
That's yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. God, I wouldn't do it. It's bad enough, if I'm doing a remote viewing session and I start drawing pointy things, I'm going, oh God, it's the pyramids again. And once you get that idea into your head, then your imagination will kick in and start being, oh, well, it can't be this if it's the pyramids. Hey, maybe it's that if it's the pyramids, and it will start
Right. And
coming up
that's
with
not
things.
helpful, I take it.
Absolutely not. No, there's different strategies of dealing with it. There's often useful information there, but as a general rule, what we say is to describe, don't name, right? So we want to use adjectives rather than nouns, because once you name something, you kind of start to filter your own data, because you want to be right. Everybody wants to be right. And once you've decided, oh, what I'm remote viewing must be the pyramids because it's a triangular shape and it's kind of a tan color and it's very warm. And it was the tail fin of an aircraft sat out in the sun, and it's a triangular shape, and it's very warm, and it's man-made structure, and it's pretty cool. It has a great deal in common with the pyramid. But once you've decided it's the pyramid, it feels metallic and hollow. Now it can't be right. You ignore that data. It must be dry and dusty and rough and sandy, right? And you just pollute your session, right? So you need to just take a break there, or ask yourself, what is it about the target which made me think of the Great Pyramid? And
Right.
then you can get down to lower level data like, oh, it's kind of pointy and it's man made and it's kind of cool. And um, those sorts of things. So yeah, we
Yeah,
try and keep it like low level and descriptive, especially at first.
right. So the podcast's all about men developing their intuition. So is there a difference between intuition and what you guys do in remote viewing?
Well, that's a good question. The fundamental mechanic of it is the same, right? As human beings, we have a consciousness which is not created by our body or our brain. Our consciousness transcends physical matter. You know that lots of people have had experiences where they've had a dream about something really random, and then it's happened a couple of days later, and they've been like, "Well, I must be remembering wrong," or you kind of write it off. You can kid yourself that this stuff doesn't happen, but or a sudden feeling you really need to call a family member, and you discover they've been in an accident is a common one, especially mothers. Mothers' intuition's real. So those kind of things, right? The information is getting to you non-locally. Okay, the definition of intuition I use is just unlearned knowledge. You know something that you've got no right to be knowing, but nevertheless, you know it. So, whatever that mechanism is by which we know things that we haven't learned, is there's no reason to assume that that's a different mechanism that's used when we wrap it up in a bunch of really nerdy scientific protocol and methodological approach. Like the way I train remote viewing, and many people do, is with quite complex methods where you're essentially doing hundreds of questions and answers. So you'll start off asking, what's the very basics of this? Is it a structure or land or water or whatever? Then move on to colors and texture and temperature and sound and form, shape and depth and motion and density and all that stuff. Then you start, drawing some sketches and shapes and then get into more analytical abstract stuff. So you build up a picture over time by taking lots of little tiny pieces. And you could think of those tiny pieces as individual intuitions that you would have, right? You can you can test these out in your day to day life. If you're sat watching cars go by on the road, ask yourself, what color is the next one going to be? Or maybe which way is it coming from? Is it coming from the left or the right? Is it a truck or a small car or what is it? And you'll find you can do better than chance. You won't get it right all the time. You do a coin toss or something. You won't get it right all the time, but you probably can exceed chance. And once you'll have a time when you get two or three right in a row, and you'll go, "Oh, wow, I'm amazing! I got superpowers! I'm so psychic!" And your ego will start making I statements about how cool this is, and instantly you will lose the ability to do it, right? Because the intellectual mind, it loves to big itself up, right? And oh, I'm so cool. I have this ability, and it doesn't. That's the part of us which is not psychic. That's like a sort of self-preservation communication system of the body. It's not the part of the human being which is aware of this stuff. So yeah, I don't think there's anything to suggest that the mechanism by which we get psychic data in remote viewing, or indeed mediumship or classical psychic stuff, or even something like shuffling a tarot deck, how does that work? It does, but how? Is any different from any more generalized form of intuition? It's just the trappings and the decorations.
Yeah. And on those lines, I did hear you on another podcast that you shared with me where someone was interviewing you and you were talking about tarot cards. And then I think I wasn't listening. I was driving in the car and I'm thinking, I think he just said you can grab a book off the shelf, flick, like with intention, flick to a random
Yeah,
page, put your finger on a sentence,
we do
and
it.
then, yeah, do it, man. I can see the books
Have
behind
you
me.
got a question?
Well, hang on. I'll remote view and get a
What's
question.
the?
No, I'm just kidding.
I got my eyes shut here. I don't know what we've picked. Oh, this one's going to be tricky. This is the Chicken Kabbalah by Lon Milo DuQuette. This is a Western magic book, so
Okay.
might be a little bit fussy. But all right, you got a question?
What's the question? Oh,
Oh, it doesn't
shucks.
matter. Come up with one while I'm doing it.
What part do synchronicities play in all this?
Well, where my finger landed on the page was gods, archangels, angels, spirits, intelligences, and demons are personifications of all our abilities and potential abilities, a wondrous hierarchy of consciousness that represents the subdivisions of our own soul.
There you go. And I've,
I don't know if
I,
that's a good answer or not, but
well,
that's
for
what my
me,
finger
I love
found.
synchronicities, and I've always thought that there's some higher help out there of
Mm,
whatever description that's putting these things in front of my paths. And years ago, one thing that really got my attention was butterflies. And one time
mm,
I was really like, oh, what will I do? Will I do this? Well, I don't do this. It was really going to affect the family, like da da da. And next thing, I'm walking outside and two butterflies are spinning in spirals in front of me, staying about a meter ahead of me as I'm walking slowly. And I'm like, holy fuck. Like, like it's just like, ding. It was like the heavens opened and an angel sang. Like it was just, but it was just two little yellow butterflies that were like not very big, but they were just spiraling in front of me and just hung there for like 20, 30 seconds right in front of me as I moved. And it was like, wow. And where were living at the time, butterflies were not that common. Like they were there, obviously, but not they weren't were not very not with the climate and the location we were on this little tropical island. They weren't prevalent, and yeah. So and for me, it's just like something has sent them to signal me to say, Doug, it's okay. It will be fine. It was actually what you should do. It's a big step. We admit that. That's why we've sent the butterflies. Like you know, and you know inside, we're just confirming what you know. This is not new information. This is confirmation. So, yeah. So what you just read out there made perfect sense to me. Yeah,
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 the hierarchy of consciousness, I think it said. And I picked that book off the shelf with my eyes shut, flipped through the pages and stopped when it felt right, and then shut my eyes and kind of wiggled my finger around until it found a place to go down. I didn't
yeah,
have
yeah,
any conscious input into choosing that.
yeah,
And a lot of that says really boring stuff that makes no sense as well because it's
yeah.
about Kabbalah and Western magic. So it's
So, tarot card manufacturers will be pretty unimpressed with you, like demonstrating that. Just grab a random book and keep your eyes
yeah,
closed, go to a random
let's
page with
call
your finger.
bibliomancy
Yeah,
that practice.
who needs a deck of tarot cards?
Oh, well, no, tarot cards have their place. I use them occasionally. I use them when I get really stuck,
Yeah,
because yeah, I have other skills and abilities and practices which are better most of the time. But sometimes a tarot card is the right tool for the job.
yeah.
You know, they're very useful as an introspective, reflective tool.
Do you feel
They're
that
not what
you
I would use to predict the future.
Yeah. Do you feel that you get an intuitive knowing to like go down that route and grab the deck of cards?
No, usually it is a conscious decision where I've got myself in a situation where I'm kind of overthinking something,
Yeah.
where I'm feeling really stuck. And because I've got that emotional attachment or upset or worry or whatever, that's maybe clouding my judgment when I try and use psychic abilities or remote viewing or whatever, because I've got a real strong opinions about something, or I'm kind of looking at a question the wrong way, but I got strong feelings about it. That's clouding my ability to kind of be quiet enough internally to listen to that inner voice. So in instances like that, the tarot cards are a great tool to externalize that. And you were just talking about synchronicity. Tarot cards, you can see them as a synchronicity generating machine, right? Because a synchronicity is some kind of event that has personal significance, but that is a random quote unquote event. And a deck of tarot cards will do that every time.
Mhm.
So yeah, I find them very helpful, but I only use them very occasionally. I'm having a really bad week when I get the tarot deck out.
Your wife sees always the tarot cards
Yeah.
are on the office
Uh
desk.
oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm curious now, have you always been this way? Or huh? So when did you start to think like this?
Well, when I was growing up, I had a couple of what I now look back at and go, yeah, I would call those anomalous experiences. I had, occasionally presents which were just freaking me out. And I had a couple of out of body experiences where I felt myself floating up out of my body towards the ceiling. And as soon as I kind of cottoned on to what was going on and was like, wow, it was straight back in my body again.
And was that when you
And
were
I
like asleep or when you're like just
no,
sitting
no, I
on your,
was awake. I just stood there. For some reason, I remember being a little kid, and I just was standing there doing nothing. I'd kind of zoned out. Um, I think I was, just lost in thought, whatever, just daydreaming, and just started floating up to the ceiling. Um, and that happened a couple of times, and then, I tried to reproduce it. I
yes.
remember I'd go and stand in the same place and try and zone out and see if it happens again, and it didn't, and I just
Oh,
kind of forgot about it. Then I went down the very traditional Western engineering science reductionist kind of educational path. Um, I always like taking things to bits to see how they work. Which pissed my parents off, I'm sure, no end when I was taking the VCR to bits when I was a
did you
little
know how
kid.
to put
And
it back together?
no, no, absolutely not. Well, I do now. I guess that's how you learn. But yeah, human beings was the final frontier of I want to understand how that really works because I don't. Um, but I didn't get the grades to study psychology because I wasn't a very good student and I didn't work very hard. So I went to study archaeology instead because I thought, well, that's still a good way of understanding humanity, right? It's just a bit of a different lens, and I still get to move out and go to the pub a lot. So, you know,
Why
that's the
not?
main thing, right? Um, so I did that, and then I needed to make some money, so I got into software engineering, because I got that kind of science engineering background. I ended up working on, well, I did like oil and gas and life sciences and all sorts of stuff. And then what kind of pushed me back towards this stuff was I was trying to work. I had like three questions that I was just stuck answering, and they were not woo woo existential questions. It was like, how the fuck is Donald Trump the president? Um, what is
How
going
long
on
ago
in
was this?
geopolitics? How do I invest my money? Sorry.
How long ago was this? Like which presidency?
Sorry. This was yeah, 2018.
Okay. First
Um,
time. Yep.
it was it was or it was just a general like what is going on in geopolitics because this just seems to make no sense. Um, and then I had something, and I was chewing over these questions. I was lying in bed at night, just ruminating on these, and I realized my intellect just could not do it. Like I realized the mental models that I had for how the world works didn't work. They didn't make good predictions, and they didn't have explanatory power. Right, so it kind of showed me I didn't understand the world at all. And have you come across the Zen koans, those impossible riddles that is
No.
used as a kind of tool to reach enlightenment or whatever, right? Where there's a riddle and you can't answer it because it makes no sense. And there is an answer, and the teacher goes, "Oh, ha, ha, you have enlightenment, you'll understand it," and they fuck with you. And the idea is that it crashes your intellect because you sit there and you try really hard to solve it, um, and eventually you can kind of get like a blue screen on the intellectual mind. You can crash it, and it will like shut down and reboot. It really is like that. The whole thing just goes and switches off, and you get a little instant in between where you get to experience what consciousness is like without the constant bullshit from the ego mind going, "I'm an individual. I'm a human. I'm called this. I like that. I don't like these people. I like pancakes." Once when you turn that thing off, the experience of consciousness is like vast and undifferentiated and really really wild. And so there's me, like science and engineering guy, who like I wasn't anti-sci, but I just assumed, well, those people must be nuts, right? I hadn't like done a concerted study of those people and decided that there was evidence to support the idea that they were nuts. I was just like, well, that can't be possible, can it? Because it's not in my physics textbook. So
Yeah, they
everything
don't
that isn't
teach
in the
that at
textbook isn't real.
university.
Yeah, yeah, that's not real. So this thing happened to me at like 11 o'clock at night or something, and it changed everything. And like there weren't choirs of angels or anything, but just after that brief experience, my perception felt completely different, and it didn't look any different. I wasn't, seeing colors and hearing voices and stuff. There was just a knowing that it was different, and there was a certainty that I had to investigate this. that I couldn't forget about this, that there was a cat that could not go into a bag. I just wasn't sure what it was yet. So all I really knew was I've missed a major trick here. I have a huge gap in my understanding, and I absolutely must find out what that is. So from that point, I started going through like all of the conspiracy theories and crazy ideas, everything that I'd written off as like improbable or implausible or crazy or dumb or stupid or impossible or all of that stuff because I didn't know what I'd missed. Right, I had no spiritual background, no real religious background of any substance, and absolutely nothing to guide me here. It was so I was still approaching it like a sort of research thing. So yeah, I spent a few months going down every internet rabbit hole I could find, and obviously that does a certain thing to the videos that YouTube suggests to you when you're watching all that kind of content a lot. And so it suggested to me a TED talk by Russell Targ, who's a laser physicist who was heavily involved with the Stanford Research Institute when they were doing the early remote viewing work. And you can find it on YouTube still. It's called like Banned TED Talk, and it wasn't banned. You know, it's a video of the guy on stage at TED. He obviously wasn't banned.
That's
Like,
good
just shut up.
marketing.
It's clickbait, yeah. But I think they knocked him out the headline spot because they were like, "No, it's too far out, man." And anyway, so I listened to this thing, and he's talking about the U.S. psychic spying program, and I'm like, "No way, that cannot be true." But at the same time, because I was on this like investigatory kick, I was like, I have to find an experiment that I can run, right? Because I cannot trust anybody to tell me what this is. Oh, come to this seminar for $600 and you'll have the secrets of the universe and we'll charge up your energy crystals and something vortex, blah, blah, blah. You know, there's so much bullshit out there. And I didn't have my intuition developed. So I couldn't filter it out. And I was like, well, so I got no way to differentiate this stuff. The only thing that's going to answer this is if I can be empirical, right? If I can do experiment at home that doesn't cost $600 and require a magic space helmet from the Pleiades, just some actual empirical science that I can do, that's what I'm looking for. So this Russell Targ video, I was simultaneously like, that's impossible, that's nuts, that's dumb. But then I promised myself I'm going to be empirical, I'm going to be an empiricist. And I was like, well, this is an opportunity to run an experiment that's free, that will, prove this one way or the other. So let's do it. So I Googled for remote viewing targets and I found one and I grabbed a post-it note and I scrawled a few lines on it. And I was going, this is so dumb. This isn't going to work. And then I opened up the target and I'd drawn a bunch of lines that matched like uncannily well with the feedback image. Like it wasn't perfect, but it was pretty damn good symbolic representation of it. It was like a 4-year-old had drawn it, but it was recognizably the thing. And so I was like mind blown a bit at that point. I kept doing it, did it again and again, and it kept working. But I still didn't believe it, right? Because my worldview was again, it didn't have space for this, right? This wasn't included in my models of how the world worked, but it was working. So I was sitting there doing something which I believed to be impossible. And every time I did it and it worked, the weight of evidence that this was a real phenomenon kind of grew until eventually it sort of rug pulled my worldview. And something that I learned over the years is that our sense of self, our ego, our identity is constructed upon worldview, right? It's a reaction to the world which we experience ourselves as being in. So the worldview is actually the bedrock of identity. So if you start pulling bits out of worldview, like, for example, the primacy of physical matter and physical reality, bits of the ego start falling off. It actually is an existential experience. It's akin to parts of your personality dying, right? So it can be really psychologically disruptive. And it was for me eventually. Yeah, here I am now having trained in remote viewing and like Western ceremonial magic and all sorts of crazy stuff. And I've somehow managed to come out the other end sane and still capable of undertaking engineering work. I think you got to maintain balance, right, and stay grounded with this stuff. So yeah. it's been a long and crazy journey that I wasn't expecting, but like you with the butterflies, I kind of feel like I'm here for some kind of reason. This was too weird and too specific. The forces which conspired to get me to where I am in life now. If I wasn't here, I would still be miserable and depressed, sat in an office, getting a bad back, arguing with computer code all day. And I'm glad I'm not doing that.
Yeah. So how long ago did this sort of start to happen for you?
This was the end of 2018, so
Right.
um,
Yeah.
yeah, 2019 onwards.
Yeah. And do you work
So
as
yes,
a software engineer or anything like that still now? Or?
no, I quit a few years ago,
Right.
um, and I'm much happier for it.
Okay. So you have any sort of regular job or
No, I do woo woo. I teach remote viewing. I do remote
right.
viewing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, like I think I'm not making as much money at it as I would like to. So I think I probably will just find some regular work. But now my perspective is like I don't need a respectable career white collar job in tech. You know, I will find something that is going to give me the flexibility to do the important work,
Hmm.
um, and make some money and not clutter my schedule up and take my whole time and all my energy. So, yeah, like many remote viewers, it'll be for a day job.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious with all that, do you think that you chose to come to Earth at this time to pursue what you're pursuing now? Or do you believe stuff like that?
I don't know. I mean, those are useful models, right? The notion of Earth as a school or um, an experience that you could choose and plan to have. But it appears to me that linear time is part of this reality that we find ourselves in. That the idea of, one billiard ball hits the next, hits a couple more, and there's a sort of roughly linear knock on effect seems to be something which you really only get here. So the idea of planning to come before you do, well, hang on, we're looking at that from a space where there isn't really a before and an after. So I think we got to be careful about projecting our human experience onto the metaphysical experience, whatever that is, um, because it can be difficult to separate out our metaphors that we're using to think from whatever it is that we might be experiencing there, right? Because if our only toolkit for understanding personal experience is our physical experience of Earth with linear time and linear causality and individual people and plans. And yes, I made a spreadsheet with cosmic Microsoft Excel to list my life lessons that I will learn before I come. When we project these ideas onto our perceptions of the non-physical kind of reality, whatever that is, then we get a picture that's a mixture of the two. And those can be the only lenses that we're able to understand what we're perceiving through. So then we kind of confuse the metaphor for the reality. And I think there's something to the idea that we certainly do a lot of growth and development here. And that if you do it hard enough, you get to a point where you can kind of see past the illusion. This is the definition of enlightenment as somebody who's completely beyond the world of opposites, right? The world of duality, who can see completely past it, which I sort of can't. But that's evidently, well, not even an end point, but evidently a goal of the development of consciousness. So yes, that's happening. Yes, we get synchronicity that guides us down paths in life, whether we are conscious of it or not. But I'm very wary about saying, that's because Earth is this or Earth is that, or we interact with it, whatever we are in that way, because it can kind of limit how we're able to think about it or the experiences we're able to have or our reasoning when we're thinking about our lives and what we want to do. If we have like really strong notions about what we are and what it is to be here. So I think those ideas are useful, but I'm just really kind of cautious about believing them as like literally true. They're kind of metaphors which might be helpful under some circumstances and unhelpful under others for me.
Okay.
Sorry, that's
So
a very on the fence answer, but I'm very on the fence about the issue.
yeah, no, no, that's great. So with all that being said, what do you think the purpose of intuition is in our lives? Now, I've never thought of that question before until I was listening to you, and I thought, oh, okay, you've taken me into a different realm.
Purpose. So the purpose of intuition, if it has a purpose, it presupposes a design decision that it was intended for something rather than that it is a natural part of the thing. Um, so yeah, that I mean that rather yeah, I suppose is a kind of clockmaker style intelligent design creator notion for it to have a like oh, and we've got these things on our list of requirements for which we will add intuition, right? So, um, but what is the purpose of intuition?
Yeah. And I'm not meaning to put you on the spot, but it just the
Yeah,
question
yeah,
came
no,
to me
it's
for the first.
it's
I've never had
interesting.
that thought
It's
before.
a really interesting way to think about it, isn't it?
Yeah, and you've
Um,
triggered it off in me, and it's
oh,
I
yeah,
don't
we're going to
have
have
to have an
completely
answer,
lost the
so don't
plot by
feel
the
on the
end of
spot.
this.
But
We're going to go off the deep end. That's okay. Let's do it. Um, so yeah, what is the purpose of intuition is separate from what is the use of intuition. Like,
yes,
what is the purpose is a why question rather than a what question, isn't it? Um, so to answer it as a why question, it I think it is a natural part of the human being. It's probably when you take whatever we are as a consciousness out of physical reality into it. What we call intuition here is our natural mode of perception. Intuition is what leaks past all the noise from the physical and the sense of identity and our physical senses. Uh, it's just knowing. So, from that point of view, what is the purpose of knowing? Um, which I think then gets you're going to get very metaphysical very quickly, and it's going to depend on your worldview, what you think the purpose of knowing is. One little interesting aside if people are huge nerds, um, a interesting branch of mathematics for metaphysics is information theory. And physicists have now produced a like an actual sort of estimate of the energy equivalence of one bit, as in bits and bytes bit of information, and draw on that like direct concrete equivalence between information and energy, which, as we know, is kind of interchangeable with matter. So you can approach the whole physical and non-physical creation thing as an interaction of information, and that's one lens that we can look at it from. So, what is knowing in that context is that information going from one place to another place, or being copied from one place to another place, and maybe remixed a little bit, or is it a sort of entanglement sort of idea? Is it the same information that's now connected to two different networks of consciousness or knowledge or information? See, I said we'd go off the deep end. I'm leading the charge.
and I think that could be the name of the podcast, "The Purpose of Intuition," because I've never seen that one out there before. And yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's a
No,
good name. It's
yeah,
got a double meaning.
yeah, we're going off my deep end anyway. Like you've taken me sort of pushed me off the diving board, and I'm still floating through space, waiting to land in the pool. But, and I love it. Yeah.
Well, once there's a story about the Buddha that once somebody asked him, "Hey, what about all the other planets and all the other worlds and spheres and all the aliens and the divas and all of the stuff?" And he was like, "Just shut up and do your meditation. You know, that is not something that is worth considering. There's no point even talking about that stuff. Go and sit down." do your practice, and find out what you are, and then we'll talk aliens and stuff, right?
Yeah. Work
Because
out the
maybe,
basics first. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
what I was saying about models and the lenses through which we look at reality. Um, yeah, maybe when we're really um, stuck deep in this reality and we're doing the physical thing and we're paying the bills and cooking dinner, those lenses probably not ones that we can take with us as useful tools for looking at the big existential questions of consciousness and the nature of creation and stuff. Anyway, isn't this podcast supposed to be about intuition in a more practical way,
Yeah. And you
rather
just,
than
and I just jotted down,
yeah,
you just
cost
mentioned
benefit?
meditation. So I'm curious, what's your thoughts on meditation? Do
It's
you
great.
meditate? Is it helpful?
Not, I don't have a formal practice at the moment, but I did for many years. And I did various different sorts. I did not do lots of guided meditations. You can find these things on YouTube which have music and binaural beats and bells ringing and somebody telling you to do stuff. I mean, that is not practice, right? That is follow some instructions. Maybe you might get into a bit of an altered state. Maybe it might be useful personally, but it's whatever that is, it wouldn't fall within my definition of meditation practice, which would be much more boring. Sit on your ass in silence and train your concentration, train your awareness, train your introspective ability. Meditation is like going to the gym for the mind, right? So sit there, put a dot, make a little dot on the wall with ink, and then stare at it for hours and see how well you can get your attention to rest there without having to fight it, without finding yourself getting taken away by trains of thought. So I've done that kind of stuff because intuitively it felt like the right thing for me at the time. Then I had a really, really hard time for a couple of years. The what I was talking about before, the worldview rug pulling from out from beneath the construct of self, right? Because my worldview completely fell apart from from where I started versus all the experiences I have. That rather collapsed my ego a lot. So a lot of the construct that was me died. They call it the dark night of the soul, which I thought was a thing just for poets and artists, which I've never been, but apparently it's a common psychological phenomena that has a cause effects and can last anything up to decades. Unfortunately, I got through it in a couple of years and just about survived it. But yeah, that is kind of like constantly dying, right? Because it's all different parts of the ego, which is, it's a construct. Who we think we are is just a bunch of stories orbiting around nothing, right? There isn't oh, who's the true me? And bullshit. There isn't one. It's literally just a narrative, right? But we're really, really attached to it because it's a survival mechanism, right? Our ego is the part of us that doesn't want to get old. It doesn't want anything to change ever because that means we're still safe and we're still alive and right. So yeah, when you have to be conscious for large parts of it, just getting like ripped off. Um, yeah, I kind of it was very hard, and I didn't handle it super well because I didn't even know what was going on for the first 18 months. And nobody explained it to me. I didn't have a spiritual teacher; it just happened. And yeah, it was deeply shit for me and those around me, and it sucked. But the outcome is very good because I'm now kind of unencumbered, I guess, by lots of things which used to be part of me and aren't anymore, which are no longer weighing me down or getting in my way. So that's good. Sorry, it was meditation. Yeah, and that is at some point during that experience was when I kind of dropped my formal practice and just went, fuck this whole thing. I will just wait and accept it and see what happens and allow it to progress and stop trying to take control of this process because I kind of recognized this isn't about ego having control over the process. This is about allowing this to happen. It's kind of like spiritual puberty, right? It's just going to happen. It's going to start one day and it's going to continue until it's done. And no amount of meditation or prayer is going to change that. It's just something. It's a difficult time in your life that you just got to get through. So yeah, I kind of just was like, yeah, fuck it. Whatever is supposed to happen to me will happen to me. And if I really need to practice meditation for some reason in the future, I'm sure that I will feel the urge to take it up again. But yeah, I used to have a practice that I stuck to every single day, every morning would be the first thing I did, because that way I knew I'd actually do it, you know, before I got sidetracked with the day. And lots of weird things happened to me, and it made my attention much stronger and made my awareness clearer. It was great. Um, I would say everybody should do it, certainly before a practice like remote viewing, which is in itself beneficial and has some of the same benefits as a meditation practice. Meditation is probably more of a broadly useful thing, and you can do it in 5 minutes. It's simple, right? If remote viewing is doing a kind of Cirque du Soleil crazy trapeze act of the mind, then meditation is just lifting some weights. Right? It's simple. We can just get a couple of core practices, focus on this. And if your mind wanders, focus on this. And that's the entire instruction manual, right? It's nice and simple. It's easy. You can do it every morning. You can do it when you're tired. You can always do it, really. So I think that's a better thing for people to adopt, because if you train your mind, um, you will start to kind of discipline the animal part of the human being, which will obviously make you more effective, and less susceptible to being upset and driven into making stupid choices by the parts of us which are less well equipped to navigate reality, physical reality, and the human world that we've constructed. So yeah, for practical purposes, I would tell people do meditation. But if you want to learn remote viewing, of course, then the weights that you're lifting, the muscles that you're training are the intuitive awareness. So there's two parts to that. One is the being aware of it in the first place and being quiet, listening, um, training in such a way that you can ask a question that is specific and get an answer. Um, and then the second part of that is decoding what you receive, right? Because the psychic part of us, if we're looking at this from the point of view as like the human being that we see here, the so-called meat suit, that there is a bit of that system where psychic data come from, and that is in what we would call the subconscious mind. So this intuitive knowing kind of bubbles up from somewhere. And as it bubbles up, it passes through the subconscious mind. So it is filtered by all of the symbols and stories and memories and trauma and whatever junk is down there in our subconscious. Colors and filters the data as it comes through. So I sometimes say to people that as a remote viewer, you are like a mirror, and your job is to reflect your target onto a sheet of paper. Okay. So if you look at your paper and you haven't drawn the target quite right, or you haven't described it quite right, or there's some aspect of it that is not mentioned at all that should be, then that means we need to polish the mirror, right? We maybe need to straighten out a dent or clean some dirt off it, right? Um, it really, if you look at yourself, that is how you improve awareness, because by bringing that subconscious content into your conscious awareness, it is no longer this kind of like hidden, dark, mysterious thing which clouds the data on the way through. So the more self-aware you become, the more accurate a psychic you can become. And this is what Carl Jung was talking about when he said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate. We need to get down there, look in our subconscious mind and clear that stuff out, bring it into awareness,
All right. So you're saying, so I just
trauma,
want to
sort out your phobias.
sort that one out there. How do we bring,
Mm.
are we using meditation to bring our subconscious into our consciousness awareness or something else?
Well, I mean, the traditional way to do it would be psychotherapy, right? You can do techniques. I mean, it wouldn't really be a meditation, right? It's not weight training. This is inner work, shadow work. This is noticing what triggers us emotionally and then pulling on those strings until we get at the content. Because the subconscious mind, it's you're familiar with this left brain, right brain thing,
Mm.
with the left
Yep.
brain being very linear and it's into language and labels and time of being linear, and then the right brain doesn't do language. And it's a woolly analogy, but it's a useful one. So we've got this like right brain, subconscious kind of bit of us, which doesn't do time, right? It just everything is this timeless, perpetual fog of beliefs which are floating around down there. And a great deal of it is just junk childhood trauma from when our teacher yelled at us or whatever. Anything which causes an emotional reaction which exceeds our ability to cope with it in that time, it kind of overflows. You've got a bucket which can fit so much emotion in it. And when you overflow that, it goes down a safety valve and it ends up uh, compartmentalized in the subconscious mind. And this is what repressed trauma is. You don't have to have something really terrible happen to you. You need to be unable to deal with the emotional intensity of the experience you're having. So, in order to keep you safe, that subconscious mind will create it's kind of like having a cyst. If you get a splinter or a foreign body in your body, the immune system will make a little bubble around it and it will be all filled with pus and it will make you feel a little bit unwell, but it will kind of be encapsulated and they'll try and keep it locked down, right? Trauma works exactly the same way, that we've got this content that is down there and we're not quite isolated from it, but it's been encapsulated to keep us safe. So what we need to do is find that stuff and feel those feelings, right? Open, drain the wound, let that stuff out, and it always feels very scary to go down and explore those spaces because it's unknown. It's dark and it's mysterious and it's unknown, and we're worried that we're going to find out something awful happened to us in our childhood, which changes our narrative of ourselves. And you go down there and it's like, oh, my teacher yelled at me and it gave me this core belief that my work isn't good enough. So now I never do a good job in my day job because I believe my work is not good enough and I'm kind of making that come true. And it was like just some complete bullshit that as an adult you look at and you're like, this is just insignificant. It's meaningless. This is a completely insane conclusion to conclude that your work is not good enough ever because remember, this part of us has no time. It is never good enough because we got yelled at once as a kid. But that was just the message we happened to take. And in order to keep ourselves safe, we're now like, oh, I don't want that to happen again. So my work is not good enough, right? And you end up with, stuff like I can't breathe down there from whatever childhood experiences or past life experiences or at least other life experiences. There's so much junk down there. There's psychic junk. Once you get past the layers of whatever happened to you in childhood, that you start getting into stuff that you can't identify as being from your current lifetime. And whether the idea of past lives really makes sense or not, I've certainly found stuff in that space which is not from my life and isn't mine.
This
Um,
current life, you
that
mean?
Yeah, yeah,
Yep.
not from this incarnation or this dude here. Um, and again, I don't want to put too much interpretation on that. Ken Wilber put it quite well that like doing your inner work is like cleaning your front yard. It's not your garbage, but it is your yard, right? That's,
Yeah.
yeah, we
It
just got
blew
to
in
go
from
through
the
that stuff.
neighbour's yard, but it's in your yard
Yeah,
now.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
or just the street, or somebody dumping that over your front wall, or whatever. It doesn't matter where it came from. Ultimately, it's not about blame or
Yeah.
understanding. It's just clean it up,
Yeah.
and then you can have a nice place to be that is
Yeah.
clear and
And,
spacious. And
and I'll tell you now, my advice is the sooner you do it, the better. Because I'm 61 and
oh yeah,
I've had a lot of water phobias. And I,
mm,
July last year, I went and had my first ever swimming lessons. But to clarify that,
right.
I'm also a scuba instructor. So I'm fine completely under the water. Like I'm euphoric but at the surface where I can't touch issues. But a couple of hours ago, I just did half a kilometre at the local pool. I do that about 3 days a week now, and
Mm.
I'm getting extremely comfortable swimming. I don't get puffed like I used to because it was a race to the other end, so I could hold on and get, like I finished that lap, I'm holding on at the
Mm.
other end of the pool, and now I'm just totally relaxed. And do I wish I'd done this in my 20s? Yeah, I really do, because my whole life it's been an
But did you
excuse and I've
overcome
avoided things.
did you overcome that by just force of will, or did you try to address the psychological
I have like
underpinnings of the feeling?
I'm sort of aware of like potentially where it came from to a degree, and so I just decided I'm going to slog this out physically and mentally. And, I meditate, I do breath work, I eat very clean. I do a lot of things. I tick a lot of boxes that I think
Mm.
are going to assist that. And then none of them are the answer for it. But I'm I'm doing what I can do to reduce the pressure of all that. And I'm knowing that because my goal is to go because I live very close to the ocean and I live very close. If you were a surfer, you would be jealous of it if I named off half a dozen beaches like the world class where they have surf competitions and they're right there. And my goal is
Mm.
to go and swim out behind the waves and just free swim in the ocean out there for a couple of 100 meters to up and down. So that's so I'm still
Mm.
to get to that yet. But yeah, no, I've just literally slogged it out in the pool, like had lessons. It's very hard as an adult to get swimming lessons. Incredibly hard.
Mm.
They're all for children. They just look at you silly like you can't
Yeah.
swim. I go, well, I sort of can, but I get exhausted very quick or whatever, like I need help. I need a coach. I need a swimming coach. And for where I live, you think they'd be everywhere because there's a million swimming coaches for children, but not for adults. And the first swimming coach I had, she was probably like 20. She's looking at me like I was a goose, like, you know. Anyway, but then she sort of palmed me off, like, oh, you don't need my help anymore. And I'm like, well, I do. But anyway, so I've just persisted, watched YouTube videos, and just got through it. And every now and then something will go and I'll have a physical sensation. My feet will cramp up or whatever goes on that I know is emotional. And I just
Oh,
keep pushing through it. And I'm 1,000 times better than I was 18 months ago, I can tell you. But yeah,
I mean,
I wish I got rid of
the
it a long time ago.
still there in the subconscious mind, and
Mm,
you're teaching yourself by force that it's safe, but the trauma is still there, and sometimes it will reactivate and cramp up your feet or get you out
mm,
of puff or whatever.
yeah.
Um, a really powerful technique that I learned is to actually, you have feelings in your body that activate when these kind of trauma cluster things within the mind get switched on, and they kind of come on like by sympathetic resonance, right? You know the thing with two tuning forks
Hmm.
that tune to the same note. If you ring one and hold it, the other one will start ringing. So when we have experiences in life, like for you getting into the pool, which kind of resonate with this, it will wake it up and it will activate core beliefs, the false beliefs. Like I can't swim, I'm drowning. Who knows what it is what belief is in there, but that's going to switch on, and then your body, will react to that. Um, Maybe your feet cramp up because you can't swim, and it's making it come true, right? I don't know. You have to go look, but you can actually use those somatic feelings which you notice arising in the body as a string to pull on to get the trauma out. And that you cannot cheat with trauma. Um, you have to feel your feelings, right? You can't go and get Reiki. You can't get your energy cleansed or do a ceremony. You have to feel your feelings, right? And I think this is a big problem in spiritual practice or people's approach to doing this stuff is spiritual bypassing, right? Of going, oh, I don't need to do anything hard. I'm going to get some Reiki and I'm going to go and have a sound bath and a nice massage and some like energy something, and I'm just going to have a nice day at the spa and I'm going to be like totally enlightened afterwards. And it's like, no, you have to go and do all this hard stuff that sucks and it's scary. And no matter how much of it you do, you always feel resistance to doing it because it's always, is this the day that, I discover something terrible about myself and um, the ego hates it, right? Because it is about change. And ego hates change. So the very mechanism of identity that keeps us feeling like we're alive and going to keep being alive does not want us doing our inner work. Right? It's a real battle, but there's no replacement for it. We cannot proceed unless we get down into the subconscious and deal with that. And once you do, you feel great. And will be like I've had that with remote viewing. Like I've had it in my day to day life, of course, as well. But it all an example of how it affects remote viewing that really sticks out just from my own learning. Very commonly, as practice targets in remote viewing, you will be given dams and bridges, right? Because they're really nice big structures. They're very clear shapes and forms and functions. They're really massive, chunky, and obvious things for you that you should learn to describe. Um, so they're really common. And I found whenever I was given a target which turned out to be a dam or a bridge, I would describe people jumping off and ending their own lives, or people falling to their death during construction accidents. It would always be people falling to their death, whether deliberate or not. And I would miss the bridge, and you would get a session which was like about people falling to their death. And, you get the feedback and it says, the viewer will describe such and such a bridge. Here's a photo of it. And I've not mentioned anything about the bridge, just people falling and dying. And that would happen every time I got a dam or a bridge. And then I, did the inner work and was like, right, let's imagine myself doing a remote viewing session, doing one of my past ones where this has happened and look carefully in, what does my body and my mind feel like when this thing is going on, whatever's happening, and then gently kind of inquire with myself, give me a memory where I was feeling like this, and kind of keep digging down, try and get to the earliest content in there. And I can't remember what it is, unfortunately. I always use this example, and I can't remember what the hell the core belief or the trauma memory was. Like it evidently didn't make a big impact on me because I've just forgotten about it. And now when I remote view dams and bridges, I just describe a dam or a bridge. Like it's completely cured because whatever that was in there, I just went and looked at it, and it's literally just making it conscious. Its entire power over us is that we won't look at it. It's a blind spot, right? So we'll have happier, easier, clearer lives without those blind spots. We will be harder to manipulate. We'll be harder to mislead. Our intuitive bullshit detector will be great. Um, it will improve all aspects of life to do that. So yeah, if you want to do one thing, sure, learn remote viewing, sure, do your meditation, do your shadow work, go to therapy, find some way of getting some support to do that. Or, you can find free resources online. There's all sorts of crazy stuff you can do and a great many ways to skin that cat, right? So you don't need to do it in a particular way. You do need to do it.
Yeah. And actually, just recently, I've hooked up with a coach who does quantum, all sorts of stuff, and would specific. I've had two sessions, and another session in another couple of weeks, and we've very specifically been targeting my fear of the water and that sort of stuff. So, and it does seem to. I mean, there's been no
Awesome.
light bulb moment, but it does seem to have because 4 hours ago I was in the pool, and I watched a YouTube video probably a couple of weeks ago, like learning, like techniques of swimming, to overcome these certain problems. And the guy just said on the video, he said, stop trying to swim on top of the water. This is the swimming coach on YouTube. You swim through the water, not on top of it. And if you're always trying to stay on top of it, and man, I tell you what, the light bulb came on for me hearing that. I think I was able, because I'd had one of these sessions at that stage, I was able to hear that. And today I'm deliberately at the pool swimming through the water. I'm not trying to stay on top of it because the fear's gone. And it's like I'm able to swim through, I'm able to breathe easier. The technique to breathe is actually easier when you're swimming through it rather than staying on top of it. And so you're able to get the right
Yeah,
amount
yeah.
of oxygen back in and you don't get tired. Because I think the title of the YouTube video was why am I tired and puffed and exhausted after 50 meters, even though I can swim properly, and it's like, and it was, and I was like,
I
oh,
think I watched the same video actually
yeah. And it's
because
actually
yeah, swimming was
a
one of
guy
my
from the
things that
UK. So it probably was the one you watched. And yeah, and it's just like, but I know if I'd have listened to that a year ago, I wouldn't have got it. I was just like, oh, I've got to be on top. And that's why I used to get puffed all the time because I'm trying to stay on top of the water and I'm trying to get to the other end as quickly as I can so I can stop and hold on. So like,
mm,
I made
mm,
it. It's like this mud pile. I've got to get through the mud, get to the other end and hold on so I can, like, and then now
yeah.
I've got to do another lap. I've got to get back. There's nothing enjoyable about it. Whereas now I'm
Mm,
enjoying it and I'm flowing through the water and it's becoming effortless and it's like, oh, this is nice.
mm.
The tension's
Can
gone
you
from
just
the
do
muscles.
the starfish float where you float on your back like a starfish? You put your arms and legs out and
Oh,
just
that
float there.
yeah. On in very calm water, I can do that easily. I can float with the water like
Mm.
just around my face with my eyes, nose, and mouth out. And that's what, and like here's the thing
And
to
is that
become
okay when you
sorry.
do that? Is it just this? Is that okay when you do that? So it's
I
just the swimming itself.
That's fine. I can float there because when I became a scuba instructor, I had to tread water for 15 minutes or something like that. And I didn't tread water. I literally just floated on my back because I was in very calm water. So it wasn't splashing over my face. And yeah, I can do that. Yeah. It's just certain things. It's not everything. And like I say, you put me under the water with scuba gear, a
Yeah,
fish. Yeah. So anyway, we
that's
just,
going to be really interesting when you find out what it is.
yeah, yeah,
What is it that you learn to believe as a child or in a past life to
mm,
keep you safe that
yeah,
is in conflict with swimming through the water?
yeah, yeah,
Probably an adult was like, "You'll die if you go in the pool,"
yeah. Well, my
"You'll
mum was always
drown."
freaked out. She was raised in a Catholic orphanage because her mum died when she was two,
Wow.
and she never had ever seen a swimming pool. And when she was 16, her brother, much older brother, came and picked her up and she went to go and live with him and there was a swimming pool at a local hotel. So one summer they're down there and someone came up behind my mum when she was 16 and pushed her in, just having fun, not realizing my mother had never even seen a swimming pool before. And so she sort of, and my mum was very short too. She was only 4'10", and so that didn't help. And so down and she always told me, always, like I went down for the third time and that would have been it. I would have died, but someone grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out, like, and it was this, and so her whole life she never got back into a swimming pool again until about bit over 20 years ago, we bought a house with a swimming pool. And once she came over and I put the pool noodles, put about 4 pool noodles under her arms, and she was in her 70s, and she went and bought a pair of swimming bathers and she was freaked out, but it was her choice, and she did it, and she's like, oh, it's trying to pull me under, like like she thought the water was trying to pull her down, and anyway, I floated her around the pool for 5 minutes, and then she got out, and she was ecstatic that she'd done it, but that was the first time she'd been back in a pool. It's probably like 60 years since she'd been in one. Yeah.
That has just reminded me of an interesting phenomena surrounding subconscious trauma, complex things, is that they're transmissible. You've heard of generational trauma.
Mm,
Um, Very commonly, as parents, I've experienced this. I'm sure you have. You lose your temper and you yell at your kids, and then they cry and you feel terrible. You're like, I failed as a parent. Um, when we are in a state like that, where we're kind of a bit out of control and we're not staying calm and making our kid feel safe. So they become emotionally overwhelmed. Like they're in that state where the bucket is overflowing. And we're in a state where we're probably triggered, probably something in us that we haven't dealt with is active, and that's why we're scared or angry or whatever we've yelled at our kid. We can transfer these things just like you cough and you spread a cold around.
What's the analogy I was just thinking? Yeah,
Right?
spreading
They
germs.
yeah. But it's about being in that state, right? The kid is overwhelmed, so whatever goes in is going to get lodged in the subconscious at this point. Um, and you really activated some unhealthy shit not otherwise specified within yourself, or that's got triggered somehow. The whole thing can just migrate from person to person. You can end up with other people's trauma, literally, and they move as a kind of it's like a thought ball. I visualize them as like a tangled ball of string or spaghetti or something, right? Just the whole thing will from one person to the other. And so you can grow up with generational trauma, inherited trauma that's actually been transferred in a kind of psychic way, if you like, which is a really interesting phenomenon. But it can make a lot of sense of feelings or particularly phobias, but just core beliefs that you internalize. And it's weird. Like, nobody ever taught me this, but still it's in there. Still, I feel it and behave in this way. And that phenomenon explains why for me. And
So,
I've found stuff like
yeah.
that in myself.
Would you say emotions are always involved there, like E energy in motion, like with that transference? So the receiver has, there's been emotion in the receiver, obviously, and in the person
Hmm.
who's had it, shared it, they've been emotional, and
Yeah,
that's why it's been there. But do you think there's had to be that energy? And there's been an emotion that I would describe as we don't enjoy, has locked it in.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, emotion as energy is a really interesting one, isn't it? Let's go off the deep end again. Ready? Get your scuba gear on.
Yeah.
Going down.
Let me
Um,
get a fresh tank.
so the kind of emotional energy which drives these processes is cognitive dissonance, right? Where we have two ideas which do not mix. Um, so those could, well, any kind of trauma idea, right? For example, when you're in the pool, you've got some kind of core belief about that not being a safe place to be, right? There's some kind of traumatic experience. Maybe it's your mom's experience, right? Who knows where it comes from? It's somewhere in the subconscious. And it means when you go into that exact situation, you're activating that thought that says, I'm not safe here. I'm in terrible danger of whatever it is. I'm going to drown or I'm going to die or I can't do this or whatever it is. And then you've got the other idea. I'm in the pool and I'm swimming and they don't meet. They don't mix, right? They literally contradict each other. They cannot be true at the same time. And yet you're forcing both of those things to activate in your mind at the same time. What do you feel? Emotion. And when you can't feel enough emotion to encapsulate that energy, what happens? It starts coming out in your body, and bits of your body start freezing up and fucking up, and your heart races, and your feet don't work, and the whole thing starts shutting down. And I've done a little bit of investigation into this using remote viewing. So, this isn't based on pure theory. This is like, I'm really curious about the mechanics of this sort of trauma energy stuff. It came about because of this phenomenon of astral parasites or non-physical entities, or in IFS they call them like unattached something. I can't remember, but there's this phenomenon of like personifications of usually low-level traumas or needs or wants or something, which again are kind of contagious between people, and they can appear like living beings, like spirits or demons or something people interpret them as, but they're not. They're not conscious. They're like we see scary faces on them because they're our demons, if you like, but they're also a transpersonal phenomenon. And you don't have to treat them as a transpersonal phenomenon. You could deal with them like you can be a nuts and bolts materialist psychologist, and you can deal with that and not acknowledge the transpersonal nature of it. And I was once helping somebody to clear one of these attachments um, in an entirely non woo woo, nuts and bolts way. And when I did it, somebody else got better at the same time who was not present, didn't know this was going on. They had the same issue and it spontaneously resolved because we got rid of this thing. And that was another like mind blown moment for
And
me,
that the
realizing like,
person
holy
who
shit.
got healed as well, were they very unrelated to the person you were working with or
I
knew
mean,
them?
it was in the same kind of broad social group. So the people who might have met each other or
Mm.
spoken, but the person who had the psychological issue resolved spontaneously wasn't aware of what me and the original person were doing. They were like just not present, not aware, not involved at all. But suddenly there was this change in their behavior, and it was really clear. So that kind of woke me up to the idea that yeah, this is actually a transpersonal phenomenon. So I
So
was
there's a
really interested in
tapestry
like
there like that we can't see weaving
yeah.
energy together somehow.
Well, these things get described as like parasites or energy vampires, which I think is giving them too much credit. It makes them sound scary and
Mm.
like they have some kind of consciousness or volition. They're in my mind energy constructs. They're made of information, and that cognitive dissonance we were talking about. Um, when we have to hold two conflicting ideas. You know that trope of the wizard battle with the two beams going, and the goodies and the
Mm.
baddies fighting it,
Yep.
and it meets in the middle, and there's a big explosion. Cognitive dissonance works like this, right? And that conflict of energy, it's like having a nuclear reactor, right? You need to confine that energy and hold it in, and the mind pushes to keep those things together, but it's like pushing the south pole of two magnets together, right? The closer they get, the harder they will push. So when you strongly activate two ideas which conflict like that, the mind starts to generate energy to push in to keep that shit contained because you made like a psychological nuclear bomb inside your head. And it seems to be that energy which actually drives this sort of parasitism process and a whole button like the ones in the body when things kind of overflow out of the emotional realm. Like it's that power that is used to actually confine that, which is why if you take the extreme case of this is paranoid schizophrenia, where people have voices who are always saying negative, mean, horrible, demeaning, degrading, depressing stuff to these people, which is in conflict with the core beliefs that we all kind of have as a default programming, which keep us alive, right? These phenomena are deliberately waking up things which conflict within the psyche of those individuals. Because when you do that, the mind generates this force to kind of keep that damage contained. And the way to resolve it is to resolve the cognitive dissonance, get it out of the unconscious into the conscious. And then you can see which idea is dumb and wrong. Maybe they're both wrong, right? Or maybe the ideas are compatible, but the dissonance will go away and then that energy will dissipate. So when you fix these things, and I'm talking about esoteric forms of talk therapy, but talk therapy nonetheless. I'm not talking about exorcisms and energy work and all that, like just doing introspective work. You can feel the energy go like, it's like a string is snapped. The whole thing relaxes when you do this. So yeah, I can't remember what the exact question was now. Something about emotion and energy. And yeah,
Yeah.
that.
And it's something it just made me think of too. Like, 15 years before I was born, my mum had that thing happen with where she thought she was about to die and drown. So you mentioned like potentially that's come through from her to me 15 years later when I was born. But my mum also
Mm,
told me that she was always freaked out with dogs. Like when she was about
mm,
11, World War II got really bad, and the Catholic orphanage she was
mm,
living in got shut down. So they put all the children on the train and sent them home because she still had a dad, but he drove cattle, so he would be away for 2 or 3 months at a time, like driving cattle across Western, like country Australia, like out. So he just decided he had five little girls and he couldn't deal with them, so he sent them to the orphanage. So the orphanage sent them home. Now my mum recollects the first time, first time she's ever been out of the orphanage. She's probably 11 years old. She arrives at her father's property out in the bush, thousands of acres, and these five or six dogs ran, and her and her sisters were all very, very short. Like I said, when she was an adult, she was 4'10". Um, and these dogs, she said, I remember these dogs jumping all over us, and like we thought they were going to kill us and eat us, and like and she's always been freaked out by dogs. But now mum's 94, and when I go to visit her in the nursing home, she has a whole different reality. Like she still talks about normal stuff, but occasionally she has this stuff that comes out of nowhere. She goes, "Do you remember my pet dog, Billy or something like that?" And I'm like, "No, I don't, Mum. Oh, maybe I had him before you were born. Oh, I loved Billy." It's just these big stories all about her pet dogs. And we're like, all you ever said about dogs is you're scared of them. And she was. Every time we would go somewhere, and if there was a dog, she would not get out of the car. She wouldn't go into people's yards. She'd get rashes on her legs. She was freaked out with dogs. Now she's got these new memories that she loves dogs and she always had a pet dog. And it's like, so that one, we just sort of like let her go along with it. Makes her happy at the moment.
Yeah,
And but she's
yeah.
she's not totally lost it. Like you can have other normal conversations with her, but she brings in these things that
Hmm.
like from a different past life or something. I don't know. Like it's yeah, we find it a bit unusual, but now her
Have you
fear of
tried
dogs is
bringing her a
gone.
real dog to interact with?
Sorry,
Have you tried bringing her a real dog to interact with?
actually that would be
Is this one
interesting.
like Billy?
Yeah,
And see whether the fear is really gone, or
yeah,
how deep this change is, if it is a
yeah,
change.
yeah.
That's wild. I don't have an explanation for that. I no idea what's going on there. That's interesting.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. All right, well, we've been going for about an hour and a half, a bit more. I've got one final question for you, and you can
I feel
answer it
that we haven't talked about
as
intuition enough here, have we? We should pay lip service to the topic of the
all right.
podcast.
You can answer this one as simply or as deeply as you choose. If your microphone was connected to all 8.2 billion people on the planet right now, and you knew they wouldn't blame you, judge you, shame you for anything you said to them, what would you say to the people of the world who are listening right now?
Oh, that's a good question. Nobody ever asked me that before. I mean, the funny answer is to say, this is your God. I'm the real one. I wouldn't say that. Um, I don't know exactly how I would phrase it, but I think I would want to say something which highlighted that what we see around us, how we perceive the world, is a reflection of us. Just like I was talking about remote viewing, being the mirror. Actually, when we look outside ourselves, we don't see other people as they are. We don't see situations as they are. We don't even see physical reality as it is. We see a reflection of ourselves. Um, and the more of your shadow work and spiritual work that you do, the clearer your vision becomes. But a great deal of the conflict in the world, if not all of it, it derives from shadow projection, right? It's from people seeing in others the things that they hate about themselves and externalizing that, making other people into their demons because they're unwilling to face those demons in themselves. And anything that is going to persuade people to stop blaming other people for the fact that they don't accept all parts of themselves and go to therapy or become a therapist or just fucking deal with it and stop shooting people and stuff just because you hate yourself, you pussy. Grow up. Um, you know, I would do something along those lines.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah. It's
So,
deep and
all right. Yeah.
meaningful. And
Okay, put me live. I'll do it.
yeah, don't we wish we could flip that switch sometimes and instant interpretation, etc., etc.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Awesome. I've thoroughly enjoyed our time together. I've been pushed off the diving board into the deep end, taking a long time to hit the surface of the water. Um, yeah, your understanding of the world and things is wonderful. It's great. And I guess that comes with your education. Like, it's varied and it's, with archaeology and computer science and humanity and things. Yeah, you explained things wonderfully. I loved it. I think the men listening will definitely pick up some gold nuggets out of there and find something to help improve their lives. Yeah,
Oh,
absolutely.
thank you. I've had a great time. It's been fun. I feel like we haven't talked about intuition itself enough. We should have done some practical. What can I actually do? But we'll have to save that for another day, I think.
We might do that for another day. Yeah, we'll come up and we'll scientifically come up with some things, simple
Yeah,
things, and some a very few different levels of practical
it's
things to do.
it's actually my big interest at the moment. Is a problem that I'm trying to solve is how to take some of the benefits of remote viewing and other kind of like really specific practices. How do we get those benefits with the lowest amount of work, right? How can we share the fruits of this in a way that's easy to learn, easy to communicate? Because there's people in business and just in their day-to-day lives benefit so much from this. But also spending a year training 2 hours a day in remote viewing and an hour a day in meditation, and it's an insane thing to do, which is not a reasonable expectation to make of yourself under most circumstances, right? So, yeah, that's my big question at the minute: is how do we get this out to a broader audience in a way that's practical? So, if I ever manage to answer that, perhaps I can come back and tell the listeners.
Definitely let me know. Excellent. Thanks for your time, David.
Cool, thank you.
Well, we're at the end of another thought provoking episode. Remember to subscribe so you'll be alerted to new episodes. I want to say thank you to the men who are joining me on this journey of intuitive development. I truly hope our time together has expanded your reality and reinforced trust in your ever reliable gut feeling. Embrace your intuition, it will not lead you astray. Until next time, stay tuned, stay curious, and trust your gut.